Hello and welcome to the Alpha Movement Podcast. My name is Tom Foxley and I help functional athletes gain a champ's mindset and then elaborate upon that process within this podcast. Now, before we get into today's show, which is going to be a very, very important lesson for you guys to learn, a few bits of admin. First of all, seminars, and I don't know why I keep saying first of all because there's only one thing at the moment. Seminars, February the 17th at 3 Aces CrossFit in London, and then May 19th, Primal Performance in Weert in the Netherlands, and I'm definitely butchering how to say Weert. October 20th in CrossFit City Line, which is, I'm super excited because off to Watertown, Massachusetts. And October 27th, another one in the States at CrossFit Push and Weight, and that's just outside Richmond, Virginia. So, today's show though, I wanted to start off with a word of warning really, and to set the scene like any good storyteller would do. I was driving in my car and I was having a little reflective moment to myself. And I was thinking about how I got to where I am, why I'm not a programming expert, why I'm not a nutritionist, and why mindset has kind of leapt out. And there's my own personal challenges that I've spoken about before, coming over or overcoming depression, having some fairly shit stuff happening in my life and working over that, having very low confidence and coming around that, and there's all that side of it. But I think it fundamentally comes down to a few years into my coaching career, and when I was just moving firmly into the CrossFit scene. I'd been personal training for a while. I was getting more competent, I was getting experienced, but I was looking at my personal training clients and I would say that only 30% of them were getting amazing results. And by amazing results, I mean achieving their dreams. And that's what I want everyone to do who works with me. Those are my standards that I work towards. I don't really settle for much less. But 30% for me, that's a 70% failure rate. I was looking at that in ways that, yeah, 30% are doing fine, but there's got to be something else that's improving. And the straight away, the answer is to think, okay, they must not be doing the right things. And you look at the right things, and right then, the first thing that was pointed out to me, or that became obvious, was programming. So I invested so much time into learning about Russian methods of programming, going back to the basics, reading fantastic books like Starting Strength, and really getting into that world of programming, looking at the CrossFit approach and how that worked, and digging around in some old Russian textbooks. And it was great. I learned a lot. But seeking the knowledge wasn't the answer, because this only helped another 5% or something. So I'm still at a 65% failure rate at this rate with my clients. So I looked at who I was working with, and whilst it was a mix of athletes, half were looking to perform better, and then you got like 25% that were looking to drop some body fat. And then you got a few more as well who are just kind of very scattered goals. So I thought, you know what? Let's help out a big proportion by fueling people who want to recover better and helping people drop body fat who want to drop body fat. So obviously nutrition is the one. So the next step from there was to really start digging around in podcasts like Rob Wolf's podcast, which is fantastic, and Ben Greenfield's podcast, which is equally good. Ben Coomber's podcast as well was huge for me at that time, and they're all brilliant podcasts and sources of information. I got so into the zone diet at the same time, massively into the zone diet. I was weighing everything, measuring everything, got all my athletes doing it, and so many people fell off this approach that, again, it was only 5% or so that got fantastic results. And so, yeah, I'm at 40% and 40% success rate now. But that's still a 60% failure rate. And what's more, this had probably taken about 9 months. So I took another step back, started looking around at everything that wasn't working again, and I realized that my athletes were moving like shit. They weren't moving properly. They had a bunch of injuries, so my focus then changed to mobility. And this was around the time that Kelly Starrett was really coming to prominence in Mobility World, and again, a fantastic resource, but the information I garnered didn't help anyone. It may have cured a few niggles here or there, it may have helped people move better, it definitely filled my ego, but it didn't help. Like, it didn't massively rocket people to success. It wasn't that magic switch that I was looking for. And there's a lot to be said for someone looking for a key switch, like something that I can implement now that's going to change everyone's approach and change everyone's results. But there's something much more obvious at heart, and that is that it was so blatant that I should have been focused on mindset. And I didn't realize this, like it was an aha moment. Quite frankly, I was overcoming a lot of my shit at this time. I'd just at that point, I was halfway through Marines training. I was running and failing at 2 businesses at that point. I had a lot of shit going on in, like, one big thing in my family and personal life. It was a very tumultuous time for me, and frankly, I didn't have much stability. So for my own personal reasons, I began looking into the world of mindset, but I wouldn't have called it mindset back then. I would have called it, I'm not sure what I would have called it right then, because I just didn't have the reference point. I began playing around in meditation, and this was fantastic, but once again, I went straight in towards Headspace, and I was looking for key bits of information. And then, luckily enough, on this podcast, I was very lucky to be introduced to Brian and Carrie. I'm just going to take a sip of delicious coffee now to create atmospheric pause. So I was introduced to Brian and Carrie, and from that point, my life completely changed, and that is no understatement whatsoever, because what I was given then is a fundamental understanding of my athletes and mindset and why adding shit doesn't work. And I'm enormously grateful for those guys. But the next step was to start applying this specifically to functional athletes. And the areas that I saw people weren't excelling in, number one, self-belief. Like, that is fucking huge. We are predetermined, or we are, it's a natural evolutionary strategy to be negative about situations. But right now, chances are you don't need that much negativity in your life, and it's not really helping. And I saw all these different areas as, like, for example, self-talking WODs and having no concept of limiting beliefs. And then I started applying these to the individual athletes that I was working with. And this worked phenomenally well. And suddenly my success rate, it wasn't up to 100% at all, because some people just wouldn't do the work, but it was about 90%, and this was the trigger. And it wasn't through finding an extra thing to add on. It was in isolating who these people are and why they want to achieve what they want to be, why they want to achieve who they want to be, not what do they want to achieve, because there's so many ways to achieve a what. But there's only so many ways to achieve a what, but there's millions of ways to achieve who you want to be. And these kind of conversations were the things that completely changed my athlete's fortune. And that's why it's such an important thing to focus on who you want to be, understand your mindset, and move forwards from that point, because there's no amount of mobility or nutrition or programming knowledge that's actually going to help you achieve your goals. But what will is understanding your mindset. Now, want to finish this with a bit of practical advice and another sip of coffee, of course. So, practical advice for today. You may have heard me talking last time about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and me having my ass kicked quite a lot recently. And I realized that the biggest thing I was doing that was fucking things up was I performed very well, and I was seeking that same performance. I was seeking to really stretch out and have something that I didn't actually have a hold on and never did. And I spoke about like relying on the unconscious to do the work for you last time. But the biggest way I allow my unconscious to do the work is to go through a kind of a grounding process before I walk into the academy. And what that looks like is I walk through the door, and about 50 feet before that, I've taken my headphones out, paused my podcast or whatever I'm listening to, and I'm just thinking, I'm here to get better. And that kind of small implementable tactic to really settle your mind and to focus on why you're there and what you want to achieve is huge. And it's very easy for us to rush straight into performing at a ridiculous intensity, and we're like rushing back from work, or we've got to get back from kids, or we've got a million things to do, and we're just like, okay, I'm in the gym and out the gym. But taking those 20 seconds before to resettle why you're there and what you're there to achieve is often enough to really get that intention there. And then because of that, you're going to perform better. And if you don't perform better, you give less of a shit about it, to be frank. And that, guys, is all for today. If you enjoyed the podcast, please head over to iTunes, leave a 5-star review. I can see a bunch of them going up at the moment, which, as I said, makes my ego grow enormously. And yeah, leave 5-star review, subscribe, recommend to a friend if they enjoyed it. And if you are in the London area, I will be with you on February the 17th. If you're in Weert in the Netherlands, or near Weert in the Netherlands, I'll be with you on May the 19th for the Mindset RX seminar. If you are in, where are we, Watertown, Massachusetts, or Boston, Massachusetts, October 20th. And if you're near Richmond, Virginia, that's October 27th. I'll be there. And you can find out much more information about this at mindsetrx.com/seminars. And I'll speak to you guys very, very soon.